My name is Dan Kilbride. I'm on the employee benefits side of things here at Innovative Employer Solutions. I'm your host, along with Lynn Zimmers. She's our Director of Marketing. Lynn will be role-playing as a potential candidate later on. Our moderator this afternoon is Rick Kiracofe. He's the founder and president of Innovative, with corporate headquarters in St. Petersburg. As you can see, Rick is enjoying the ocean, at least an early sunset this evening behind him. With nearly 40 years in the PEO space, including founding Innovative Employer Solutions in 2001, he has extensive experience, has a firm understanding of underlying dynamics necessary for the successful operation of small and medium-sized businesses. In addition to his CPA, Rick holds an MBA and a BA in accounting. And he's a great storyteller. So we're going to find that out today. For those who may not be familiar with the PEO space, they are professional employer organizations which provide human resource services for their small and medium-sized business clients. They help pay wages, taxes, assistance with compliance, and especially in the current situation we're in, state and federal rules and regulations. PEOs may also provide workers with access to 401k plans, health, dental, life insurance, you name it. They enable clients to cost effectively outsource the management of human resources, you name it. So without further ado, take it away, Rick.
Thank you, thank you. All right, so let's talk about how to help hire, how to hire better folks. So let me, okay, everybody can see that okay? It says Hire Right, a behavioral interview guide. So.
Nope, not quite up, just quite yet.
Pardon me?
It's not just quite yet.
There you go.
Nope, just hold on 1 second. There's an extra share button. There we go. Hiring best practices.
Okay. All right. So everybody can see that now. All right. So here's the points we're going to hit on today. We'll talk about behavior interviewing and why it's different from what some folks do as interviewing. Leading and theoretical questions are really the core of behavioral interviewing. We'll do some follow-up questions. We'll also address sales, hiring salespeople, because they're a little different and the techniques are a little bit different. We'll talk about some job posting, applicant hiring, employment laws. We'll catch that at the end. So the first thing when you're talking about an interview, and I'll get back to the very basics. Before you ever say anything, I've seen a lot of interviews where you walk in and the person doing the interview starts the interview by introducing themselves and then going on their 10 or 15-minute dissertation about the company. I really kind of recommend not doing that, and really a couple reasons. For one, it may not be a person you're interested in hiring at all, so to spend 10, 15 minutes telling about the company is kind of a waste of the interviewer's time. Maybe more importantly, secondly, it gives the candidate insight into what you're looking for, and they can more tailor their responses to what they think you're looking for. And I really like to get just their raw understanding more of what the person is, rather than getting to understand what we're looking for and then responding in kind to that. But I do like to, it's important to be polite, introduce them, little chit chat, how's the drive over, how's traffic, do explain the interview process, whatever that process is for you. If this is a initial interview followed up by a subsequent final interview, how that process goes. And even if I'm only doing one interview, I always say, this is an initial interview and there'll be a follow-up, just gives me an out. So, if you say this is it, and at the end of the interview, you don't offer a job and somebody's looking at you, well, what happened? So again, sticking with the briefest of introductions saves you some time and doesn't tip your hand. So what makes an effective interview? The most effective way to determine how a person will perform is to determine how the individual performed in the past. So kind of like the stock market. The stock market says past performance no guarantee of future performance. Typically, when you're dealing with people, though, past performance, particularly in the most recent positions, is the performance you're going to get with you in their current job, or if you hire them, the performance you'll get. So understanding what that past performance is like is critical. And it really comes down to the type of questions you ask. And there's really three big problems, and this is the bulk of what we're going to focus on. This is the meat of it. One is asking leading questions, where you ask a question basically where the answer is understood and the person basically gives you the answer you're looking for. Asking theoretical questions, where you ask a question and it doesn't say what the person does, you just start talking about theory, and then failing to ask really detailed questions to really determine exactly what the individual did in their previous job. So let's talk about leading questions. So the expecting to answer is obvious. And there's one example here. You didn't let the individual get away with that, breaking that rule, did you? Or you say something, would you agree that? Whatever the person answer, they're going to tell you what you want. They're going to say, no, I didn't let them get away with breaking the rule. Or would you agree that? Yes, I agree that. So it's really not going to give you any insight into the individual. So here's a couple examples of leading versus non-leading. So we're going to interview Lynn here just to kind of see what type of answers you get based on the different types of questions. So we'll start out with a leading question, which we're calling in this case a poor question. Lynn, do you enjoy working?
Oh yeah, I love working.
All right, I didn't learn anything. She learns
Working's great.
I set her up for a nice positive response. A better question would be, Lynn, what about your work gives you the most satisfaction?
Okay, so when I get to create campaigns with my team, I enjoy collaborating and get results that actually matter.
So, so now I've gotten specific insight into what she does. Or a question like, do you think it's important to get things done?
Oh, absolutely. You have to get things done for business to run.
A better question would be, say, tell me some things you've gotten done in your past job.
So I have, sorry, I lost my place here with some things I've done in my past job. I have created a new forms for everyone to measure our returns for our investment. I've created some new teams that have taken some responsibilities that weren't addressed before, and we've streamlined that process. And I've actually created new ways to measure the success of those teams.
Awesome, thank you. So you can kind of see the difference in the questions. If you ask a leading question, one I like a lot is, are you organized at work? Most people would say, yeah, I'm organized. If you say, please provide a step-by-step procedure, then you see how they're organized. You start seeing how they process. Particularly if you're hiring internal people, more the administrative, bookkeeping, financial types, they should really be able to give you a step-by-step procedure all the time. So the other type of question we want to talk about is theoretical questions. So when you ask a theoretical question, you just get theoretical responses. You don't actually understand about what the actual performance is like. So there's some example. Theoretical questions use something like, what would you do? That's theoretical versus what did you do? What have you done? What are you currently doing versus what are you going to do? So let's go for a couple examples. So I'll get Lynn back here.
Hello.
Lynn, when do you feel it's necessary to introduce change in your job?
Oh, when the needs for the business change, it's important to constantly evaluate yourself and improve upon that.
Much better to ask, Lynn, when have you introduced change in the job?
I really haven't made any changes in my current position. I just go in and do my job.
So we'll talk a little bit about later. That's not necessarily a bad answer. It depends on her position. She might have been in a position that was very structured, more clerical, where they're not looking for changes. But it gives you an insight into how she looked for a job, and it gives you an area then to kind of get an idea, get thoughts of what you think the person's like, and then an area to start proceeding and asking more detailed questions. How would you change your job?
I would like to have larger objectives and goals to maximize the profitability of the company.
I'm not sure what that meant, but that was an answer. So a better answer or a better question, how have you changed your job, or how have you grown within the job?
I've taken on more responsibilities and tasks to alleviate a lot of pressures on my boss.
All right, great. So the whole thing between theoretical and behavior, theoretical, you're just pie in the sky, you're talking about theories. Behavioral, you're asking what they specifically did. So the key to this is the follow-up questions. And before, let's do a quick review of where we're at. So I'm going to ask 3 types of questions, and everybody think, which is it theoretical? Is it leading? Is it behavioral? So Lynn, is it important to prepare for the interview?
Oh, definitely. You've got to prepare in life.
Okay. What kind of question is that? I would call that a leading question. What do you think is best way to prepare for an interview?
Well, I definitely think you have to research the company and find out the values if they align with your own. And you need to see if it's really something that you're looking for.
Okay, so type of question? That would be theoretical. She didn't tell me anything specifically. The question I really need to ask if I want to dwell in this area of how to prepare for an interview, how did you prepare for the interview?
Well, I did a quick Google search for you guys, and I found out what you do, and I was planning on doing a little bit more research, but I just got busy with my kids and I didn't have my coffee, and I just didn't really have that much more time to prepare.
So interesting, 3 different answers. So the last gave me a lot more insight into the individual, into the candidate, on how they prepared for the job. Now, again, I would warn against one answer necessarily killing the candidate, but it does give you an area to prepare and ask more questions. So that's kind of the next thing to behavioral question, theoretical questions, they're kind of the behavior is really where you want to be. But anytime you ask one, you really want to dig down and understand the underlying behavior. So you start with more specific questions, basically follow-up questions. So there's an example here. I like this one. When an applicant says, I plan all my meetings with my staff. Well, that sounds like a great thing. But what does that mean? Because you got to really delve down and say, well, tell me, what did you do? Who did you invite? What did you discuss? What conclusions are reached? What did you do with your conclusions? Tons of questions you can ask about that. And you may find out the applicant's idea of planning may be ensuring coffee and donuts are ready. So that's why the follow-up questions are really important. So here's some follow-up questions. Give me an example of. Give me another example. What were your specific duties? This is, again, one of my favorite. Take me through the process step by step. Describe specifically how you did that. When did you? So, really any type of, you can ask a behavioral question and you get different kinds. It depends on the type of job. Often if you're doing a salesperson versus a more clerical person. A more clerical person may give you one-word answers, and you may have to work to get out, the answers out. Obviously, if it's a salesperson, obviously you may have to work to keep them to not talking quite as much. So, introspective versus extroverts, it makes a difference on how they'll answer the questions. But the underlying thing, so that's something to kind of take account for. What's the personality like of the individual? But while you're going through that, you really need to get down and really understand what their behavior was like. Take me through the process step by step. What else? Who else? What did you institute? What did you do? Really have to attain that understanding. So you really want to understand the why behind the actions. When you're asking questions, typically you want to focus on, obviously, those things in the resume that you're interested in that are the behaviors you're seeking. And probably more importantly, that you want to focus on experiences that are most recent on the resume. And the reason is, although, one of my favorite expressions is leopards don't change their spots. In the long run, they have a tendency to do. So the attributions, the interest of a 20-something, 30-year-old versus a 56-year-old are going to be different. And so if you're talking to somebody that's been in the workforce a while, their attitudes may have changed from their initial entry in the workforce. So basically, you do want to take really the last job or two and really focus on that, because that's probably the most consistent behavior with how they're currently performing. So
Hey,
basically,
Rick, we have our first question in the queue, if I may ask.
Sure, go ahead.
Is there a different type of question for, say, restaurant and hospitality positions, say, versus corporate positions?
Yeah, definitely. So, and we'll touch a little bit. I'll go through the salesperson. I think there's some more commonality there. If you're looking for corporate person, corporate's kind of a broad range. So I'm assuming you're talking more administrative type people. So if you're talking more administrative type people, you want to understand questions that specifically refer to process. How did they get things done? And I would ask, tell me about how your typical day is. And most people will go through something kind of lightweight. They'll say, well, I get in, I look at my emails, and I kind of plan my day. Well, then you need more information. So you would ask something, okay, you look at your emails. How do you determine which emails to respond to? What's important? And then they might say, well, I take the ones that are most important, the fire ones. And then I would say, okay, it seems like there's a lot of emails that are high need. Is that mostly how your day goes? You're responding to putting out fires, or are you able to sit back and really more plan and organize, plan things in the future? And depending on how that answer goes, if they're say, I put out fires all day, then I'd ask them, what have you tried to do to stop the fire, or what causes the fires? Is there anything you were able to do up front to help reduce the number of fires? If they talk about now they were able to do planning their day, well, tell me about some of the plans. So I think corporate people would be more along those lines, more structure. You want to understand how they fit within the structure, how they would fit within your structure. So I kind of question around those areas. If it's a restaurant person, and it depends what level you're talking about, if you're servers, I would want more of a sales type person, because they're selling, they're ultimately selling food, and the bigger the ticket, the better they do tip wise, the better the restaurant does. So I would really focus on people that are high energy level. I would ask probably those kind of people more, tell me about your hobbies. I would like to understand if they have extra hobbies and see what kind of hobbies they take. Now, they may say, I like reading books. Well, that doesn't seem like high energy, but I may ask, well, that's interesting, because you're a high visual person, you're in a restaurant dealing with people, but then you like to read books. Tell me about that. And maybe just be that it's the way for them to de-stress. So I guess the reason I say that is it's not necessary answers aren't bad. Answers are such that you form a hypothesis. And that's the third point on our bullet right now. You form a hypothesis, and then you question along those lines and just don't assume. You question to find out what that means. She likes to read books. So is this a low energy person, or is this somebody that's just trying to unwind from the day? So servers, I would try to, are they good at telling stories? Are they engaging? Are they extroverted? But then also a server has to be somewhat process oriented, because they have to bounce many orders at a time. They got to make sure the food gets out there at hot. They got to make sure the glasses are refilled. So I would ask, some process type questions. Say, if it's a table of 12, you know, how do you make sure they have a good evening meal? And then based on what they say, you know, it may be an environment where there's other wait staff that helps, and it's a team thing where they all pitch in, or maybe she's just solely responsible for the tables, from filling glasses to bringing desserts to uncorking the wine. You know, different restaurants are different, but I would definitely go in that area. If it's the supervisor's management, again, I would be really probably most concerned with questions that fit the culture. I mean, you want managers that are people that will go out and talk to your patrons and get them excited about being there, resolve potential problems, probably with a free drink or two, that are engaging kind of people. So I would try to ask questions about folks like that. And I think the sales type will kind of, we're going to go through some sales type questions, and I think that will help kind of support the restaurant people as well. So there's always rules. So I've been kind of saying rules here. So you have the theoretical behavioral questions, and I'm big on them. When I do an interview, it's 90% of that. But when do you not ask those? You know, every rule is made to be broken. So I do ask softer questions to break the ice. And I might just to get people kind of used to talking. And some people are going to be very nervous in an interview, and that's not going to help me if they're too nervous to talk, because they may be great employees that just nervous at the interview. So I do try to create an environment very much where I ask some very softball questions. Also, once you get some rapport built, a few softball questions, you start kind of digging in with some behavioral questions, and then you start doing the follow-ups whys. You do have to be careful. It can be very much an interrogation type. So you want to try to keep it light. If you any opportunity to take some of the pressure off, or say, yeah, I understand, I feel the same way, so they can kind of relate to you. Because if you do find somebody you want them to like you. So there's a point where in the interview, it kind of turns from a little bit, you're selling the position, you're interviewing, to you're starting to sell you and the company a little bit. So the questions can then get a little bit softer. So just need to be aware of not too much interrogation and building rapport. One of my favorite closing questions, and I've gotten all types of response for this. So as a part of our, I'll read it just the way it is. As part of our process, we will talk to your last supervisor. When I call them, what will they have to say about your performance? And it's really important at that point not to say a word. And at this point, you're at the end of pretty much near the end of the interview. You pretty much have a strong feeling of the person one way or the other. If you've already discounted, it doesn't really matter what they say. You may not even want to ask this. If you're really interested in this is a good one. But the key to it is, after you ask the question, not to say anything. Let them talk, and let them, at this point, you know, you built some rapport, they're interested, you're interested. If they struggle with this question, let them struggle a little bit, let them figure it out and get an answer out. I've had people on a couple of occasions say, oh no, you don't want to do that. Which was kind of, well, thank you very much, enjoy the conversation. So you'll get all kinds of responses to this, but they're usually very telling. And if people, and you have to say it like you're not, we may call, we are going to call. So that way you get the most truthful response, because if there's damage control, they'll start trying to do it, and you'll see that. This is a little bit about the culture. So you want to really develop your questions around your corporate culture, what the role is in the company. So, you know, if it's a detail person, you want to ask process-oriented question. If it's a front of the house type person, you want somebody social. So you want to ask people social type questions. I'll talk a little bit about sales ability. Sales, they're going down in the black area. Says, give me an idea if you approaches of sales. It says, give an example of 2 different approaches you've used. I've used a third of the approach, which is the most successful. Why? You want to ask these kind of questions to see if a salesperson has a system. Getting back, I'll use our restaurant people. You do want to ask them questions like, how do they approach people? How do they take the order? What kind of questions they ask? Because an experienced server is going to have a process, and you want to understand that process. And if that's going to fit in with your restaurant, with what you're trying to do. This is a really important one. Every salesperson must oversell a little bit to clinch a sale. Can you give an example when you did this? This is really the integrity thing. If they start telling a bunch of stories where they're fudging a bunch to get sales, not good. And then the last part is really, I think the whole key to sales. You have to understand number of prospects, number of calls, number of closes that the person's producing. And you as an organization should really have these numbers too. How many prospects, and if it's up to salesperson to generate them, I mean, that's fine, but do they have to do 200 prospects in a week, make 10 calls, get 1 close? Whatever those numbers are, you have to understand that. And then when you're talking to somebody, they need to have that understanding in the past, because that's how you maintain performance, particularly salespeople. Salespeople are difficult because salespeople can talk. They can relate. They can be sociable. They can sell you in the position, but you really need to understand what their production was like, and that they understand what their production was like. So that gets down to number of prospects, number of calls they made based on those prospects, and number of closes. So a good salesperson should have some idea of that. That's kind of the whole key, really, to sales management. In a 3-word explanation, that's pretty much it. Salespeople, story-based questions. So tell me a story. You want them to be able to talk. Tell them about a situation. Tell them about a time. So there's just storytelling. Salespeople should really be storytellers. Much as I know we have a preschool owner in the mix too. So it's same thing with those folks. I mean, you want your teachers to be able to tell stories. Teaching is storytelling. So you want people that can tell you stories and engaging stories, because that's the way people learn. So hopefully you're trying to find somebody that's a good engaging storyteller in a school situation. Job analysis. So you really want to understand the position, titles. So creating the ad is really the first step to getting good candidates. So here's a bad ad. This is for a bookkeeper. And this is an Indeed. So it was, they were paying money to put this up. And the part that I've identified in yellow, the highlights, those are the typos. Looking for an experienced bookkeeper. Intermediate skills with Microsoft Excel are required. Minimum of 3 years with the possessive experience with QuickBooks. So, and then even the structure of it, you're talking about an accountant with payroll experience, but not required. An accounting degree would be preferred, but not required. That's a little bit redundancy. Basically, most ads you write, accounting degree is preferred, but not required. I don't know what they're trying to say. So not a great ad. And it'd be interesting to see if they got any responses, but we'll never know. This is the kind of ad that we wrote for a bookkeeper. So, right in bold, we put our interested in working number one growing professional employer organization in Tampa Bay. Then we go through, due to our recent high growth, we're looking for experienced general order bookkeeper. We have talented individuals. So down the third paragraph, we put our door since 2001 to let people know we've been around. Fourth, if you're inspired, passionate. So this is written to create an emotion, to attract people. It was written to sell. It was basically written to sell, to get people, because I want high performance people, as you all do. So you really want to get the high performers, the high integrity folks. And so to get those kind of people want to be with leading edge companies. They want to be with exciting companies. So I wrote an exciting ad. Where to post them. So where your industry posts, it's a good place. Measure the performance. Obviously, if you're Indeed, it's really easy. Like a lot of the top boards down in 2021, pretty much with all those, it's very easy to measure how effective your ad is. And you can pay for boosts. You can do things. I like to change the ad if it's not getting any hits, change the title a little bit, change the wording. So kind of reposition, because my understanding is when you first put an ad, you're near the top. as time goes by, it starts sinking, you get down to the bottom of the job board. So I'd like to change it up and try to get it back at the top, or you just pay the boost and get it put up there. Find out where the audience is and try to reach where they hang out. If you're in a restaurant business, obviously social media would play a huge post. Facebook, I mean, that's you know, you're the 20 something for the most part, the millennials, that's where they hang out. That's where I'd look for people for jobs. Let's talk a little bit about legal. So there's a bunch of laws, and of those laws, there's some you can't ask in their interview process because they lead to potentially federal law or county law violations. So, like, how many children do you have? Somebody has children, and you ask them that question. It could be discriminatory against women that have children, so it could be EOC, discrimination against women. What country are you from? Obviously, you know, it's pretty much a no-no. What year did you graduate high school? That could be guides for finding out how old somebody is, which is a no-no. Are you married? Have you ever claimed workers' comp? Things you got, and the workers' comp's not a good question to ask because you could uncover an ADA issue, and then if they identify an ADA issue, then they now have ADA protections. ADA is Americans with Disability Act, and if somebody has such a long-term chronic condition, they could then request an accommodation from you, and you would have to at least determine if you can do it or not. And if it's a reasonable accommodation, then it would be one you should have to accept. So I'm going to get a whole lot in employment law, but the ADA can be a rabbit hole. I wouldn't go down there by asking about people's workers' comp claims. But there is a change to this. When can you ask some of these a little bit more invasive questions? Well, these questions you can't ever ask, but when can you get a little more invasive in the individual? One of the ways is, like, you can do background checks, you can do drug checks, you can do if it's more of a manual job, a warehouse, you can do medical pre-employment screening in terms of physicals. So there are things you can do. The question is, when do you do them? So the proper time to do those things is after you've made a conditional offer of employment. So that's basically go through all your interviews. You come down to Mr. or Ms. Wright. This is the one you want. You make a conditional offer of employment. You say, you know, it's good to do it in a letter. You could do it verbally, but, you know, I would do a letter in writing and say, you know, I'd like you to start the 15th of January. But prior to that, we need a drug test and a background check. And then you give them the form so they can do the background check. And in addition to that, we would like you to do a physical. Here's the place where we'd like you to go do the physical. So those kind of things you can do. You can also give them a job description and say, can you meet the requirements of the job with or without accommodation? And so if you do that, then real important, getting back to maybe more of the labor side of things. If it's a job that requires working in the warehouse and lifting, say, 50-pound bags of material, and you can tell the employee the job requires lifting 50 pounds bags of material, can you do that with or without accommodation? So there are ways to find out about their health, but you can only really do that in the guise of, here's a job description. Can you perform these duties as described with or without accommodation? And why I'm saying accommodation, that gives you coverage under ADA, so you're not including somebody where they may be accommodated, and then you can have that discussion if necessary. So there are ways to find out more about employees, but again, I really strongly you do it after a conditional offer of employment. And this is a pet peeve of mine. I don't know if anybody else has ever heard that or familiar with this term. Since we do a lot of HR support, I've had, over the years, we've had tons of owners, managers, people say, well, I can terminate, I can do whatever I want to this employee because Florida is a right to work state. Just so there's no misunderstanding, all a right to work state means is that if it's a union shop, non-union employees can't be forced to pay union dues. That's all that means. It has nothing to do with employment law. It has nothing to do with the ability to terminate or not terminate people, hire people, nothing else. It's no get out of jail free, so you can do whatever you want to an employee. It only has to do with union workshops and allowing. And Florida is a right to work state. So if there's a union shop, not everybody has to join the union, because some states that are right to work, even if an employee doesn't join the union, they're deemed to get the benefits of the union and they still have to pay union dues. Florida, you do not. That's what that means. One thing to kind of watch out for, there in the state of Florida and federally, well, the state of Florida doesn't really have that many, but the federal government, as you know, has a bunch of anti-discrimination laws, ADA laws, Family Medical Leave Act. I mean, there's a bunch of laws that employers are required to follow. EEOC has one, discrimination. It's kind of the first one mentioned there, Title VII. It's also referred to as the name of the act. Those laws prohibit discrimination due to race, national origin, you've all heard of, et cetera, et cetera. So, and you notice it says 15 or more employees. That's at the federal level. What happens though, in the state of Florida, many of the counties have taken this down to the 5 employee level. Like I know Tampa has, Hillsborough County has, Pinellas County has, I know Pasco hasn't, just to name a couple. So in Pasco, discrimination kicks in if you have 50 more employees. Pinellas, it kicks in if you have 5 or more employees. So just to be concerned that these employment laws, depending, they can have a county override. So depending on the county you're on, you could be subject to basically the federal law. And what the counties do is they pretty much take the federal statutes and just copy them and codify them at the county level at 5 or more employees. So something to be concerned at in terms of, you know, discrimination, citizenship, equal pay. You know, there's a bunch of them. So hiring candidates, once you hire the candidate, we've talked to this about this. So the key thing is during the interviewing process, there's some point where, and I look at it 2 ways. I try to look at it at the intellectual level, like just cold, hard facts as much as I can. What's the behavior like? What have I been able to identify? How do they seem like they would fit in our organization? I think of those. But I also do my gut check. Like if they're answering everything really great, but something says, I just don't like this person, even though they answered every question perfectly. All their behavioral questions were great. They did great things. You know, everything was perfect, except inside I'm going, I'm just not comfortable with this person. I don't like this person. I wouldn't hire him. I don't fight my gut. And the converse, and I've gotten burned doing the opposite because I have done the other. People usually hire people they don't like, so they usually don't have. What usually really happens is you get an individual that you really like, and even some things didn't quite seem right in the interview. Maybe there's a question or two, you just kind of blew it off, whatever. I like this person. I like this person. Those are the people I got burned on because there's 1 or 2 little things that blew off seem to end up being the whole thing. You know, when I asked them a question like, when do you think it's okay to be late from work? And they didn't give me a great answer. I kind of assumed like, oh, it's okay if, you know, your kids are sick, things happen. Whenever you need a mental health day or something, you know, it wasn't a great answer, but everything else was great. I liked them, I hired them. And then I found out they missed work 2 or 3 days a week. You know, that one little question that seemed to be a minor thing turns out to be the whole thing. So, anyway, so you're in the hiring process, there's a point where it turns from, okay, I like this person, they might be a candidate. And then your question does kind of change because the behavioral question is somewhat of an interrogation. And so you do want to soften it and then do more selling to the organization, how it's a great place to work, you know, start selling your culture. Because you know, it's a lot of competition for jobs out there. And we've gotten to the point too, now we do have an opening If it's somebody really strong in that initial interview, we'll hire them on the spot if everything else checks out. Oh, well, when I say hire them on the spot, we will give them a conditional offer based on satisfactory drug test and background check. So we will give them a conditional offer of employment. So, but we will often go that size just to lock up a hot candidate because it's a tough market right now. So that's pretty much it for today. If any other questions on this, I'll be happy to respond to it. There's an email there you can contact us on, phone number you can call us. Be glad to really answer any questions. We'll send this guide out to you. And we also have an additional guide you can contact Dan with that has 200 or 300 questions, all behavioral questions, really covers just about every industry, every situation. So that's pretty much it from me. Any final thoughts, Dan? Or
Oh, I do have one question that came in. The discrimination law, 5 or 15 employees, does this include both part and full-time employees?
Yes. Yes, it does.
Wonderful. Yeah, that wraps up the questions that I've got right now. As Rick mentioned, we will be sending you a behavioral interviewing guide via email. And if you have any direct questions, please don't hesitate to contact us or reach me at dan@innovativebenefitgrp.com as well.